David, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to have a conversation with you. I would like to share with you my perspectives on a number of issues you have referred to. And as president of Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, a multilateral development institution, I would like to clarify from the very outset that it is not appropriate for me to make comments on bilateral issues between the bank's members, particularly between China and any other member of our institution. To the extent that the issues we discuss have some degree of relevance to our business, I could offer my observations. First, I'd like to discuss with you UK's role in international financial architecture. The first issue is the role of UK in the international political, economic, and financial arena. And I would like to focus on the contribution UK made towards the establishment of the AIIB, which has also a lot to do with China as the initiator of the bank. Now, I'd like to talk about the Bretton Woods system. This year marks the 80th anniversary of the founding of the Bretton Woods system and its institutions. Great changes have taken place ever since the end of the Second World War, and drastically changed the topography of the political and economic landscape of this planet, poses daunting challenges to the present-day world, which could hardly have been envisaged by the founding fathers of the Bretton Woods. Nevertheless, one important principle of the Bretton Woods system has not changed, and indeed it is getting more relevant to the international community, that is, multilateralism. By definition, multilateralism means the institutionalized cooperation on a global scale to promote peace and prosperity and to respond to whatever risks, hazards, and problems facing the humanity. UK's significant role in establishing the Bretton Woods system is well recorded. While the Second World War was still raging, UK, the US, and other countries had already begun to discuss the approach to initiating reconstruction of the war-ravaged Europe and countries in other regions, and to ensure that deeply connected and integrated economies could ensure long-term peace without repeating the same troubles caused by the political mishandling of the defeated countries in post-World War I. The negotiation of the Bretton Woods system was mainly the drama played out by the UK and the US. Other countries were none other than the backbenchers and had little role to play. The economic situation faced by the British government and the people vis-à-vis that of the US clearly indicated the trend of geopolitical transition from the Western European countries to the New World, represented by the UK and the US respectively. It was certainly a process excruciatingly painful to Britain, but the UK has managed the power transfer to the US in a remarkably well manner, in a diplomatic manner. In the ensuing years, UK has kept its influence on many matters of international significance. Since the turn of the century, and particularly over the last 1 decade or so, China is taking the lead among the emerging market economies in catching up with advanced economies in many areas, leading to another possible transition. This time, the emerging market economies are beginning to play a role which cannot be ignored by the developed countries. Relatively speaking, the emerging market economies are already carrying more weight in the global economy, and the backbenchers are moving to the front seats. To the front benchers, this does not feel comfortable, but people will have to face the reality, and both sides need to take a constructive stance in managing the process. Now, I want to discuss the founding members of the UK's role as the founding member of AIIB. In this regard, I would like to highlight the role played by UK throughout the entire process of the negotiation of the Articles of Agreement Of the European countries, UK took the lead in working with China in setting up the governance structure and rulemaking in the management and operation of the future MDB. Many people miss the point that UK and other developed countries did not just join the bank. To be exact, UK and other European countries joined in the making of the bank. There is a fundamental difference between the making of an institution and joining an established institution with all the rules of games are made and not to be cavalierly changed. UK's role was spectacular. After UK declared its commitment to participating in the negotiation of Articles of Agreement, all the other European countries followed suit. At that time, I said that once again, the Chinese saw the great power of Great Britain. The power of a country is not just its economic might, rather, it's the soft power. It's a leading role in promoting an initiative which is expected to serve the broad interests of the members of the international community. We have talented staff from UK serving at different levels all the way to the vice presidency. To a great extent, this also speaks volumes about the importance of the cooperative relationship between China and the UK. When these two countries work together, great things can be done, and at the least, things can be greatly facilitated. Next, I'd like to discuss the Sino-UK relationship. Why it is so important. As David indicated, myriad potential sources of complication, conflict, and confusion remain so far as the bilateral relationship is concerned. This is not something that can be overlooked. The difficult part is there for everyone to see, but it makes sense to look at the upside, not just the downside. When attention is focused on areas of cooperation, it is not hard to identify vast scope for cooperation. I think that when both countries are engaged in promoting multilateral benefits, the Sino-UK bilateral cooperation will also be boosted. As the front runner in industrialization, UK has played its historical role. Over the last half century, a lot of manufacturing industries have resettled to other countries, mainly developing countries who have become increasingly competitive in labor costs, logistics, and many other areas. But still, UK has retained its competitiveness in some sectors, such as bioscience, sophisticated manufacturing, and some high-tech areas. Financial services sector represents UK's enduring competitiveness. And I know you're interested about AIIB's global presence. And I have often been asked the question about the possible London office. I told a lot of people after Brexit, we have to follow the development in the wake of the Brexit to see what is the impact. Brexit certainly poses a challenge to the UK's handling of its relationship with continental Europe, in particular with regard to maintaining London's attractiveness as an international financial center. From day one, I was repeatedly asked the question of whether AIIB should have a representative office in London. So far, there's no indication whatsoever that financial institution will mostly move out of London and its relevance to development banks such as ours will be eroded. We have followed the evolvement of the international financial markets, with more and more major cities are getting increasingly assertive in developing their financial services capability. While I do not see any sign of the possible waning of the UK's comparative advantage as a country of robust financial services, it has to be acknowledged that other major cities in continental Europe countries are not to be overlooked in developing financial infrastructure to serve as international financial centers. All in all, London remains one of the hopefuls in the competition for the venue of our bank's hub for funding and trading purposes. The final outcome depends on the negotiation with the competing candidate cities. Let me share with you my thoughts on another issue, which is not exclusively related to the Sino-UK relationship. It is more of a general challenge in any bilateral relationship, particularly between countries of different political, cultural, religious, and economic background, that is, the national security. Because of the concern of national security, the solution of some issues is long overdue. A case in point is the cooperation between China and the UK in building nuclear power plant in UK. When the climate change hangs over the head of the humanity as a Damocles sword, it is a shame that this project cannot move forward. Please don't misunderstand. I have no intention to invest in this project. Given that energy security remains the major concern for many governments, there has been some subtle change in the public's attitudes toward nuclear power. No coal, no gas, no fossil fuel of any kind, no hydro. Then what is the solution? Solar and wind power can be relied upon to serve as the basis of load of electric power supply. Could it? Now, these days, we've been discussing MDB's reform and the UK's role in this regard. I have noticed that UK has been keeping a strong interest in following the MDB's reform and is playing a role in all these multilateral development banks. All those MDBs created since the 1960s, more or less pattern after those institutions in terms of the governance structure, modus operandi, and principles and rules of operation. They pattern after the Bretton Woods institutions, which is IMF and World Bank. Perhaps the essential rationale for reform the MDBs should undertake, which is in my view a very important idea, certainly very much appealing to many people directly or indirectly involved. This is to render them more efficient and effective without pulling down entire structure. The attempt to reform a particular system or institution is in the first instance an acknowledgement of its role hitherto played by this institution. The need to change is to sustain it under the new circumstances. It is crucial to maintain the vitality of the international multilateral institutions established towards the end of the Second World War. Emerging market economies have every reason to acknowledge the immense contribution Bretton Woods institutions and other MDBs have made to their economic and social development. Multilateralism has been an unparalleled driver of economic growth, lifting millions out of poverty and spurring innovation across the globe. Nowhere is this more evident than in Asia, where economies have thrived by integrating into global trade networks. Over the past few decades, countries in the region have transitioned from agrarian economies to industrial powerhouses, significantly improving living standards and contributing to global economic dynamism. The Asian countries are all members of the Bretton Woods institutions and were benefited from their generous support at different times over the last 8 decades. The rapid growth of these Asian economies is not just a regional success story, but a testament to the power of multilateralism. By opening up markets, fostering trade, and encouraging the free flow of capital, regional and global cooperation has enabled these countries to harness their comparative advantages and achieve remarkable progress. This interconnectedness has not only fueled economic growth, but has also facilitated the exchange of ideas, technology, and culture, enriching societies worldwide. Multilateral development banks, in particular, have a pivotal role to play. Our bank was established shortly after the Paris Agreement was entered into in October 2015. From day one, it is a reformed institution. Reform was done while AIIB was still a fetus. The governance structure represents the rebalanced power between developing members and development ones. Such rebalance does not downplay the important role of the developed members in this institution, even though they are the minority shareholders as a group. We in AIIB do not resort to voting. Instead, we make decisions through consensus reaching. Efforts must be exhausted before the directors have to vote, but their efforts have so far never been exhausted, and I do not think they will. In this regard, UK can continue to play an important role in guiding the MDBs in their process of reform so as to do better for the global economy. Finally, I'd like to focus on financing for climate change. UK played a very important role in COP26. The present-day world is now under threat from geo-economic fragmentation. Today, we're witnessing increased trade restrictions and anti-competitive measures, especially in strategic sectors such as semiconductors and renewables. According to research by the International Monetary Fund, around 3,000 trade restricting measures were imposed in 2023 alone, nearly 3 times the number in 2019. As the strategic importance of green sectors becomes more evident, we also see more restrictive policies played on these sectors and their supply chains, including import tariffs and domestic content requirements. Additionally, there is an increase in export restrictions to prevent key technology from flowing to others. This fragmentation poses a significant risk to continued economic growth, particularly for emerging markets that rely on global trade to sustain their development. The challenges of geo-economic fragmentation extend beyond economic growth. They also threaten our collective efforts to combat climate change. Climate change is a global issue that requires coordinated action and shared solutions. Disruptions in trade and reduced international cooperation can slow down the deployment of green technologies and impede progress towards our climate goals. The economic opportunity presented by the green transition could become its own victim if we fail to maintain open and collaborative international relations. It is imperative that we overcome these tensions and work together to combat climate change. We need avenues for trade, capital, and knowledge to continue flowing. While it's crucial to support the growth of local industries, we must avoid the pitfalls of protectionism that can hinder global cooperation and technology exchange. The key is to striking a judicious balance. At this crucial juncture, the role of multilateral institutions like the AIIB and other MDBs becomes even more essential. These institutions provide platforms for dialogue, cooperation, and coordination, helping to bridge differences and align efforts towards common goals. By fostering multilateral collaboration, they can mitigate the adverse effects of fragmentation and ensure that no country is left behind. I've got some inspiration from Professor Hannah Arendt. Let me quote. Plato, in his famous fight against the ancient sophists, discovered that their universal art of enchanting the mind by arguments had nothing to do with truth, but aimed at opinions which by their very nature are changing and which are valid only at the time of agreement and as long as the argument lasts. He also discovered the very insecure position of truth in the world, for from opinions comes persuasion and not from truth. The most striking difference between ancient and modern sophists is that the ancients were satisfied with a passing victory of the argument at the expense of truth, whereas the moderns want a more lasting victory at the expense of reality. In other words, one destroyed the dignity of human thought, whereas the others destroy the dignity of human action. I think that we need both truth and reality. It's time that we walk out of such a primitive jungle of arguments and try to work out tough issues by standing firmly on the ground of reality. Thank you. Thank you, David, for this opportunity.